Okay, we'll start with this. I'm sure most of you have heard by now. Canelo Alvarez versus Caleb Plant. Boxing fight talks broken off. Sources say the fight is apparently dead in the water, though it should not be.
It shouldn't.
If for some reason the deal presented to Canelo from Fox and the PBC is not to his liking, that should not kill the fight.
Nope.
And I think that's what resonates with me the most right now. There are a lot of areas to cover and a lot of room for speculation. But the most important point to make about this fight is just because it can't happen on Fox, just because Canelo Alvarez is not in agreement with the PBC and Fox's deal, that doesn't mean the fight shouldn't happen. The fight can happen. DAZN can provide Caleb Plant a career-high purse, and the fight is still possible there if it's not working out.
With Bill Wenger and Al Heyman.
I think that's what's not being said. I think that's the area that's not being talked about, that's not being covered. Caleb Plant is not some major draw, some household name that we have to go through all of this in order to see a fight made with him and Canelo Alvarez. It's very obvious who the draw here is. That's Canelo. And if Caleb really wants that fight, he should, in theory, be able to cross over to the DAZN side of things to see it made, to see it happen.
It's an opportunity for him, after all.
Because how many opportunities, just like it, are there on PBC's Isolation Island? Does fighting David Benavidez get you the money you'd get fighting Canelo? Does fighting Jermall Charlo or someone else, Anthony Durrell, does fighting any of their stable of fighters from 160 to 168 get you the same kind of money you'd get fighting Canelo?
No.
Ken? Bill Wenger, Al Heyman, Sam Watson, any of those guys over there at the PBC, can they provide Caleb Plant with a fight of equal to or greater than value to a Canelo fight with someone else? Because if they can't, then what they're essentially doing is costing that fighter a major opportunity and a boatload of money. That's what they're doing. If you can't get that guy a fight that makes him just as much money as a Canelo fight would have...
It really is that simple.
So things aren't working out over there at Fox and the PBC for Canelo. He doesn't want to go into that deal. Should that stop Caleb from pursuing an opportunity across the street over there at DAZN? And what if DAZN can pay this guy a career-high purse? Can the people over there at the PBC and Fox match that? Because if they can't, if they cannot present him with a fight of equal to or greater than value than that fight over there on DAZN, then guess what?
What?
You're fucking over that fighter. That's what you're doing. Moreover, if he lets you, then he never wanted that Canelo fight anyway.
Because why would you stand there and let that opportunity go by?
It can only really be two things. It's either you don't really want that fight and you're comfortable just abiding by whatever they say, or you have no choice. You have no say in the matter. You do their bidding. They tell you to jump, you ask how high. It's being reported by Mike Coppinger per his sources that Caleb Plant and the PBC actually agreed to a rematch clause in the contract, so that wasn't one of the issues. And we can sit here and make inferences and speculate all day as to what the issues are, because we know what kind of situations Canelo Alvarez is averse to and what he expects. He's been getting buckets of cash, boatloads, up front his last 6 fights. It's safe to say that's probably what his expectations are. It's safe to say that's what he's expecting from Fox and the PBC if they want to do any business with him.
He's been getting huge guarantees up front from DAZN.
And he's likely expecting that from Fox, since they're the ones that want him to cross over. For Fox, that could be an issue because they don't normally give out those kinds of guarantees without some assurances of their own. Assurances for themselves that if we guarantee you this money, you'll do more business with us moving forward, because this is a lot of money.
And that's why they tried to pitch Canelo Alvarez that multi-fight deal.
They want to do more business with him for the amount of money it's set to cost them. But for Canelo, what matters most is his freedom, because he's already getting good money over there on the DAZN side of things. He has been his last 6 fights.
Doesn't actually need you guys.
It sounds a lot like the people over there at Fox and the PBC overplayed their hand because one of their fighters just so happened to have something that Canelo Alvarez wanted, and that's the red belt, the IBF title. And perhaps the PBC and Fox overshot it, thinking they could dictate terms to Canelo Alvarez based on that, not realizing Canelo has no shortage of options, and those options are not exclusive to your stable of fighters.
He'd get the kind of money he's looking for without your stable of fighters.
And that's what the propaganda pundits on Twitter won't tell you. That's what the narrative pushers on YouTube don't want to broach, don't want to address, that Canelo Alvarez doesn't need the PBC to make boatloads of cash.
He's been making boatloads of cash, you morons.
You know, these days everybody thinks that because they have a platform, they actually have something to say, and most of the time they don't. You have propaganda pushers like the people over there at Boxing News 24 that think they can alter people's perceptions of what's going on here as if that's going to actually affect change. They belittle Billy Joe Saunders and belittle Callum Smith. They even belittle Canelo's quest to become an undisputed champion, as strange as that might sound. And they'll talk up fighters like Jermall Charlo. They'll talk up fighters like Caleb Plant. And all of those efforts are in vain.
Shit ain't about nothing.
You can't escape the reality of these things with what you put in print, and you certainly can't change the reality of these things with that drivel. The truth is, Canelo don't need the PBC, but the PBC does need Canelo to satisfy their network affiliates. They need to deliver big fights to Fox, and they can't do that with Charlo versus Montiel, or Plant versus Truax, or Benavidez versus
Angulo and Ellis.
or Uzcategui, who he's set to fight in a few weeks. None of those fights are big fights. I'll go as far as saying that you can try to get these guys to fight each other if they're willing, though in some instances they're not. But yeah, Charlo versus Benavidez, it's not going to generate the same revenue that Canelo versus Saunders did. You're not going to pack out the house with 70,000 people that care about that fight. Not right now. And even if you could, Charlo doesn't want to do it.
Yeah, he doesn't want to fight that guy anyway.
What intriguing fights you can make in-house, you can't make because your fucking fighters are so fucking self-entitled. You've been blowing smoke up their ass all this time that they started to believe it. Now, they want an arm and a leg every time they get out there against some halfway decent fighter. And you can't give them that because they don't generate it.
Fox ain't about to lose money on these guys.
You end up sticking a few of them on pay-per-view, hoping that the fans will foot the bill for fights that don't even belong on pay-per-view in the first fucking place. Look of it to me is that people over there at the PBC and Fox overplayed their hand with Canelo Alvarez using what isn't even a B-side fighter, because Golovkin was the B-side to Canelo when they fought, and Golovkin had more marquee value then than Caleb Plant has now. So we can't call Caleb the B-side. Let's call him either the C or the D-side. You're using a C and D-side fighter as leverage against Canelo Alvarez.
That was stupid.
I saw how people reacted to the news. The bleeding hearts out there that want to pretend that this was at all a good business move for Caleb Plant and the PBC.
Like they really give a fuck about that guy.
You think it's Caleb Plant's best interests they have in mind when they say things like Caleb Plant actually cares about his career and not a payday. He knows he's getting paid on the future regardless.
Oh, because tomorrow is promised.
Apparently in this guy's mind it is. Canelo's last opponents weren't doing shit and needed money during COVID, as if Caleb Plant doesn't need the money. The man just got married.
Canelo's opponents wasn't doing shit.
What was Caleb Plant doing? Fighting the likes of Mike Lee, the Subway guy, and Vincent Farfandugan?
Fagan boots.
Going a distance with the likes of Caleb Truax. What's he, 37, 38 years old? You think going a distance with a guy like that does anything at all for Caleb Plant's stock with the boxing fans? You know, the ones that actually pay to see boxing.
It didn't.
I can tell you right now, they don't revisit this fight. It only breaks down one of two ways for Caleb Plant. He either keeps himself and his reign as a champion safe by fighting more Mike Lees and Vincent Farfandugans, or they decide to feed him to David Benavidez because they like his chances against Canelo more than they like Caleb's, and they think they can market him a lot better than they can Caleb.
It only happens one of two ways.
Does if they don't revisit this fight. For Caleb, he obviously won't make the money he would have made with Canelo fighting more Mike Lees and more Caleb Truaxes and Farfandugans and Fagan Bootses. He won't. He won't make the money fighting them that he could have made losing to Canelo. There's that.
That still costs him a lot of fucking money.
And then there's the alternative. You can make a little bit more money fighting David Benavidez than you would fighting the Mike Lees and Farfandugans of the world. But if Benavidez beats you, he beats you for less money than you would have got letting Canelo beat you. See, either scenario don't get Caleb the money he would have got with Canelo.
And that's why it's not a smart business move.
Then again, Caleb Plant is not a businessman. I don't know why these guys on boxing Twitter think that all these PBC fighters are suits when it's so obvious that they don't make their own decisions.
They let someone else make all the decisions for them.
Even if it costs them life-altering money they can't find anywhere else right now, and life-altering money that may never come back again. The case of Adam Kovnowski almost immediately comes to mind. They offered him a couple million.
Remember that?
To fight Anthony Joshua for 3 world titles after Jarrell Miller tested positive for all those drugs, and he turned it down because he had a scheduled engagement on FS1.
And he kept that engagement.
Which turned out to be a Chris Arreola fight. A Chris Arreola fight that so obviously was not equal in value to Adam than that Joshua fight would have been. I mean, he didn't make multi-millions fighting Chris Arreola. He moves on from that, and he loses to Robert Helenius for a couple $100.
He's gonna fuck around and beat Caleb if they don't revisit this fight.
That's what the bleeding hearts on Twitter won't tell you. That guy's not interested in Caleb's future by any stretch of the imagination. His concern, his interests lie with Al Heyman because he's one of these fucking guys that got some kind of emotional attachment to the PBC, and
I don't know, maybe he thinks Al Heyman's his prodigal father or something.
the number of guys I've come across in recent years that have some fixation, some kind of obsession with Al Heyman's PBC, it's truly bizarre. They have a vetted interest in this platform's success, even if it costs them more money than the alternative. Al Heyman and Caleb Plant don't know who the fuck you are.
And you're not the guy to take business advice from, buddy.
Because you're the fucking genius that's actually advocating to pay 4 times more to see the same fight you could see on DAZN for 4 times less. Which brings me back to my original point. The fallout between Canelo Alvarez, PBC, and Fox should not kill this fight, because the people over there at Matchroom and DAZN are perfectly capable of paying Caleb Plant a career-high purse
To fight this same guy.
Canelo Alvarez fighting on PBC and Fox shouldn't be a sticking point. That should not determine whether or not this fight happens.
If it can't happen there, then cross the street.
Because I'd wager the money waiting for you across the street is still greater than the money on the other side of things. It's still more than you'd make losing to David Benavidez or Jermall Charlo or somebody else. Mike Coppinger tweeted that Canelo Alvarez was set to earn more than $40 million guaranteed, upwards of $10 million for Caleb Plant, career-high paydays for both fighters. We'll see if they can quickly circle back to a deal that was nearly completed, and who knows if they will? I mean, there's always hope, right?
Right.
The thing is, Gennady Golovkin, he's on standby. Canelo Alvarez can make $40 million or in excess of $40 million fighting him on DAZN. And where does that leave Caleb? Does he make $10 million or anything close to $10 million? Staying on his side of things?
You know the answer.
Oh, it's for this reason I think that Caleb Plant needs to bite down on his gum shield, cross that street, in spite of what his higher-ups might advise him to do, because there's a good chance he ends up fighting a long line of Mike Lees and Farfandugans, and that won't make him the money he'd make fighting Canelo, even on the DAZN side of things. Or, he ends up fighting David Benavidez, loses to that guy, loses the red belt, loses the leverage he had to even get a Canelo fight, and then he's just fucked.
He's fucked.
Fucked is what he is.
Fucked.
He's fucked.
Is that smart business?
Is that what they call it where some of these bleeding hearts are from? Because where I'm from, what you call that is fucked. Guy's fucked.
That's what you call fucking yourself out of a lot of money, my friend.
In reaction to this news, I had a guy on Twitter that goes by the name of David Jones tell me if he being Canelo Alvarez, wants to be undisputed, he literally needs that last belt. To which I replied, same applies to Caleb, don't it? To which David replied, exactly. So they need each other. Kind of takes 2 parties to negotiate. And you see, there's the problem. You guys think Canelo needs Caleb. You guys think that Caleb has all this bargaining power based on that one alphabet title.
You know who else had an alphabet title?
The last alphabet title that Canelo Alvarez would have needed to become an undisputed champion. You know who else had one? Demetrius Andre. That's him. You want to end up like that guy?
This is what happens when C&D fighters start overstating their value.
You're fortunate enough that Canelo Alvarez is actually interested in fighting you in all the ways he wasn't interested in Demetrius Andre. You have the good fortune that Demetrius didn't. And you want to go fucking that up overstating your value, overstating your role in all of this. You ain't got the same leverage as Canelo. You do understand that. If the investors over there at Fox are willing to put up that kind of money, it ain't because of you.
And Al Heyman should know that it ain't because of his fighter.
Because his fighter, this guy, he don't normally make $10 million a fight. The higher-ups at the Fox offices would never approve that kind of payday for this guy because this guy don't generate that. He ain't good for it. Canelo Alvarez is. You take Canelo out of the equation, what's this fucking guy? You're gonna run into a lot of argumentative people on boxing Twitter, boxing YouTube. These guys that think they're making this big fucking argument when it's simple, really. Canelo Alvarez is the A-side. He's got the other 3 belts in this division, but more importantly, he's the marquee fighter. You're not. And if you want him, you've got to go get him. Now, he was already kind enough to come to you and deal with your people. And he's already come to you on more than one occasion. 3, by my count. And your people couldn't get it done. So at this point, if you want this fight, you've got to cross the street.
Your people dropped the ball.
They screwed the pooch, but they screwed the pooch for themselves. They ain't got to screw the pooch for you. You can still fight this guy on DAZN and still get a career-high purse. There's no actual benefit to the fighter or the boxing fan, PBC and Fox staging this fight. The only benefit that comes as a result of that is a benefit to them, price gouging us.
Because that's what they want to do.
You'd have to be an absolute fucking idiot to support them doing that, because that's what this is all about. That's why this is such a sticking point. This is so that Bill Wanger and Al Heyman can charge me and you more money for the same fucking fight with the same 2 fucking fighters that could be fighting on DAZN.
For 4 times less.
There's still time. The fight's not completely off the table. If Caleb Plant actually even has the say-so, has the legal liberty to make decisions on his own, he should get Eddie Hearn on the phone and tell him he wants to do the fight on the DAZN side of things. Otherwise, it could cost him, and it could cost him a lot.
I don't know what sport these guys think this is.
This ain't basketball, baseball, or badminton. This ain't rugby. This ain't tennis. This is boxing. Nothing's guaranteed.
You could lose your next fight.
Your very next fight. You think Bektamir Melikuziev took that Rosario fight thinking that I might lose to this guy, I might lose to this journeyman? Do you think Jarrett Hurd expected Julian Williams to work him over the way he worked him over? Do you think Julian Williams expected the banana, Jason Rosario, to knock him out? Do you think he expected that to happen? This is sport of boxing, ladies and gents. Anything can happen, and you can't afford to fritter the time away. You gotta strike while the iron is hot, and I think a lot of people have forgotten that. I'll tell you what, you argumentative guys out there, you want to keep acting like Caleb Plant and Canelo Alvarez are on the same boat? You want to keep acting like one guy is in the same position as the other? You fucking do that. I told you this was going to happen. I told you I wasn't convinced this fight would come together.
Go argue with yourself.